in Israel, the ongoing conflict after Hamas's October 7th terror attack. Some 42 Israeli reservists wrote an open letter in May stating their refusal to return to Gaza. They are among thousands of Israelis who have been called up since the start of the war to fight in the Palestinian territory. Two reservists told DW News why they're refusing to serve again.
A few months ago, Yuval was in Gaza serving as a combat medic. The young Israeli was called up as a reservist for the war almost immediately after the Hamas terror attacks on October 7. Today, he's one of a small group of Israeli reservists to publicly refuse in an open letter to return to Gaza. His decision came after his commander ordered his unit to burn down the home of a Palestinian family they had taken over in Gaza.
They told us to take a house we're staying at, and when we went out of it, they told us to burn it down. And I went to my commander and asked him, why are we doing that? Is there a military purpose for that? And the answers he gave me were just not good enough. And I said, I'm not willing to make several families homeless, especially where there's not even a reason for that, to be able to achieve something. And the next day I left.
Even before the October 7 attacks, he had planned to refuse reserve duty because of his opposition to Israel's occupation of the West Bank. The horrific violence inflicted on unarmed civilians by Hamas-led militants made him reconsider. But while in Gaza, the atmosphere of revenge and the widespread destruction made him question his service.
I felt like the things we're seeing in Gaza cannot be justified. And when we went inside Gaza, me and my platoon, it became the clearest I could have seen. I mean, Israel just took all of this anger and fury that they gained from knowing that their friends died or things like that, and just took it all on the Palestinian property.
Ofer spent almost 2 months in a war room across the border watching grainy videos. As operations officer, he monitored the movement of troops inside Gaza, ensuring their safety and authorizing airstrikes in those areas. But once out of the war room, doubts started surfacing.
It feels very, very far away from you, because it's like kind of grungy, sometimes it's black and white. It just feels, most of the time it doesn't really feel real, But then when you go out or me specifically, when I go out of the war room and then I go to my phone, you see those pictures of the aftermath or videos of the aftermath of those airstrikes. You see those people buried under the rubbles. When you start hearing the really big numbers, you start asking yourself, how can it be if we're doing such specific strikes and such a good, such a great intelligence work and everything, how can it be that there's so many casualties, so many collateral damage, right?
Michael says there were no clear rules of engagement for the troops in Gaza.
The whole system was built in a way that you kind of you fire first, and then you ask the questions. Even if you're even gonna ask any questions, because we did not ask any questions.
It is not easy to speak out. Family and friends support them, but some brand them traitors. Although refusing to serve could land both reservists in jail, so far the IDF has taken no action.
There is a chance, they can still call me to be trialed and send me to jail. But I remember thinking very clearly, and I still feel that way, that I'd rather sit in jail than do whatever we did there.
Seeing the sheer destruction in Gaza was also one of the reasons Yuval gave for refusing reservist duty there.
Driving on a road with one of those military vehicles, you look to your right, you look to your left, and all you see is ruined buildings. Now, some of them were ruined for certain military purposes, I guess. Some of them were ruined because they found, terrorist infrastructure below them, tunnels or stuff like that. I saw tunnels with my own eyes. So it is something that is happening. But Israel is definitely not trying to be surgical enough to make Gaza a place that would be livable afterwards.
The IDF rejected the allegations by Green and Ofer and said their rules of engagement were subject to Israeli and international law. They added, the destruction of buildings is done with the appropriate means. Actions done otherwise and not as a result of operational needs are contrary to the army's orders and the IDF's values and are examined. For both Yuval and Michael, one of the main reasons for speaking out is to push the government for a ceasefire agreement to end the war and bring home the remaining hostages in Gaza.
We have deals on the table. We've had deals on the table since December. Clear deals that say the war would end. We'll do a ceasefire. All the hostages would be returned to Israel, and then Israeli soldiers would cease dying. And I think something very important in addition to that, the fact that Palestinians would stop going through a living hell that they have been going through in Gaza.
They know that they are a tiny minority among reservists, but they hope to spark at least a debate within Israeli society.
Well, I'm joined now by Uriel Abulof. He's an associate professor of politics at Tel Aviv University. His research focuses on nationalism and questions of legitimacy and morality. Professor, it's good to have you with us. The reservists that we just saw in our report, they say that they often feel branded as traitors inside Israel. Is that the case? Is there a certain swath of society in Israel that would see them as traitors? How much acceptance is there for people who say, no, we don't want to serve?
I think your reporter designated it right. They are a relatively tiny minority within Israel among the reservists. The overwhelming majority of reservists still go and carry out the commands that they are being given. There is a segment of Israeli society who would regard those reservists who decline to serve in Gaza as traitors. These two are relatively marginal minority within Israel society. I think many can understand the motivations behind their decline to serve. But again, the overwhelming majority still go and serve in the IDF, those who are called to serve in the IDF, and do go to serve in Gaza as well.
Would you say that the IDF's actions in Gaza, are they scrutinized critically inside Israel?
Perhaps not as much as they should. Since the war started, there is enough indication that the army could be more judicial in affecting with its full force less than what it has when it comes to damaging civilians, both human life and properties. There is some scrutiny going on, but perhaps not sufficient. And I think the role of this letter, this is, of course, a tiny minority. And as the reporter said, it's about bringing up to public consciousness, to public discourse, the possibility that we may have stepped too far than what we should have.
Mm-hmm. How does the IDF, how does it deal with criticism coming from within its own ranks? I mean, is there place for that at all?
There is a place for that, but I think that the response that you have received, that the IDF abides by international law and domestic law as well, I think are being investigated. This is by and large the way that the IDF has been framing it also for inward consumption. And by and large, it has worked. I mean, most Israelis do support the IDF much more than they support their government, for that matter. So there is not, until now at least, much of a debate about the means in which the IDF carry out the mission. And the main reason, of course, is that the mission, at this point at least, is unclear. And it has been unclear for several months now. But that is more to do with the government than with the IDF itself.
Mm-hmm. And we know that the polls showed the vast majority of Israelis, they support the military operation in the Gaza Strip. Some even say that the military operation doesn't go far enough. So in your opinion, does that explain why we are talking about these reservists who represent just a tiny, tiny fraction of the serving population?
Look, there is a great frustration in Israel. Obviously, October 7 was a great shock And people want to see as much as possible the IDF carrying out an operation that will make sure that something like October 7 or any other iteration thereof would not be possible. And there is a great frustration because with all the might of the IDF, there seems to be no way out of it. And there is no way out of it because the IDF, other than trying to damage Hamas capability as much as possible, cannot replace Hamas as a governing body in Gaza. And the Israeli government refuses to have any other body, Palestinians or even taking hold of the Gaza Strip. So we are facing a situation, many of the reservists allude to that in their letter, that they were asked to eradicate Hamas in a certain area of the Gaza Strip, left that area, and being summoned again to the reserve a couple of months later to do the same sort of job. And that has been the case precisely because there is no one else to replace Hamas. You can't have a void.
Okay.
And this is what we have created again and again in this war, a void, and Hamas takes over again and again.
Professor Uriel Abulof from Tel Aviv University. Unfortunately, we're out of time, but we appreciate your analysis today. Thank you.
Thank you.